Welcome to the Home Birth After Cesarean podcast. Due to the rate of unnecessary C-sections, the lack of support, and limited options for VBAC moms in the hospital, more and more women are choosing to have their VBAC babies at home. This podcast was created for women to share and listen to stories of home birth after cesarean. I'm your host, Rachel Garrett. Today we're continuing our conversation with Susan, so if you haven't listened to her last 4 birth stories, go to the episode right before this, episode number 22, and listen to part 1 of Susan's birth stories. Today she's going to tell us about her next 5 birth stories, and we are going to start with baby number 5.
Number 5, Lars. I have a picture of me standing in my garden, really huge with him. I did a lot of digging, I think, in when I was pregnant with him.
And did you just know off the bat that you were going to do home birth again?
Oh, I had, my attitude was wild horses couldn't drag me back to a hospital. So the certified nurse midwife still wouldn't do it. I was still outside their protocol, and I was still too far away from Dr. Brew. They really are in trouble if you've had a C-section and you want to have a home birth, but you want to do everything by the book and have a certified provider. You know, if you want a medical type person, the nurse midwives mostly won't do it. Even if they would want to, they're sometimes what the law is in their state prohibits them from doing it. So that was the case with all the midwives that I talked to. So somebody referred me to, I can't remember why my friend couldn't come again. I think she had moved. So somebody referred to me to a woman who had trained with the Santa Cruz midwives. And there was a book about them too, Raven Lang's birth book. It has on the cover, it has a picture of a woman giving birth on her hands and knees. Very explicit, and the whole scene super hippie. But so there was like a sort of cooperative of women in Santa Cruz in the 70s who got kind of hip doctors to teach them how to deliver babies, and some of them had just, gone to a friend's unassisted birth and learned. But anyway, so they actually had a birth clinic there, and a lot of midwives who helped women give birth, and it was sort of completely outside the medical system. So she had trained with them. And one thing I'm not saying they didn't get good training, but they still had the attitude that birth is in a bed or on the floor. And they were big thing about avoiding episiotomies, which everybody had thought women just had to have. So they did this perinatal massage. So she wanted me in bed so she could do that. And I find that the contractions just hurt so much more when you're in bed than if you're up and walking. So I remember that labor as quite painful. I bit my husband's arm. He was sort of sitting next to me on the bed, and his arm was reached in front of me, and I bit his arm just out of. I wasn't mad at him or anything, like, oh, you got me pregnant. But it was more like just the need to dig into something with my teeth. But other than that birth went normally. She hung around a long time waiting for Dr. Muncie, but he couldn't come. He was delivering a baby in the hospital, so he came the next morning. So then Meg's birth, the next one, we're up to number 6, what was a very weird one. Now, in retrospect, I think I got pregnant, had a very early miscarriage, thought I was still pregnant, and that I had just spotted. And so didn't try to prevent another pregnancy and got pregnant the next month. And back then there were no ultrasounds. I mean, that you could do one, but they only did it if they found a problem. If by measuring with the hands, the baby was small for dates or anything else that would make them think something was wrong. Otherwise, that women didn't get ultrasounds. And the doctor found the baby to be reasonable size with his hands, and I didn't have any ultrasounds. So I was approaching 2 weeks overdue, and all the other ones where labor started, I had been about a week posted after the due date. I'd never gone 2 weeks. So then the poor Dr. Muncie said, now we only let you go 2 weeks before we induce, but their policy is they won't induce someone who's had a C-section. So you'll have to, they're going to want you to come in and have another C-section. And I thought, I don't want to get Dr. Muncie in trouble, but I'm not having another C-section. So, and I had been, of course, reading birth books all along and stuff about herbs for birthing and stuff. So I had my husband go and buy me some cohosh. And this cohosh came in the form of roots, dried up roots that you made, little bits of dried up roots that you made a tea out of. And I started drinking it, I remember, on Holy Thursday, and then went to Mass for Holy Thursday, and I started having contractions at Mass. By the time I came home, they were kind of petering out, and I drank more cohosh and I had contractions, and that just went on and on and on. I didn't get to go to Mass for Good Friday or Easter that year. So I just kept drinking that cohosh every time my contractions petered out and they'd start up again. I got very tired. I remember one time I was standing up in the bathroom, and we had those old-fashioned radiators, and I would put my spine right between two like bars of the radiator and press, just press my spine against it, and it felt really good. But doing that one time, I fell asleep and fell down on the floor. That's how tired I was. So finally, I'm sitting on the edge of the foot of my bed, and the contractions have slowed down again. Chris is away going to the bathroom. I remember I'm just really discouraged. And I think if another day dawns on this labor, I'm going to have to go to the hospital. And I got up, and I think it was about 3-4 o'clock in the morning. So I got up and walked around the bed to where the cohosh was on my dresser, and I feel a baby sliding down. So I grabbed a blanket off the bed and crammed it under me and caught the baby myself. I squatted down and caught her.
Oh, wow. So just right then and there is when she was born.
Right then and there, I had no idea that I had been fully dilated or that the baby was about to be born. I did no pushing. I had no sense of a normal progression of labor.
Had your contractions ever gotten like very timeable or close together or anything like that?
They were close together. They were hard enough to hurt, but they weren't really super hard. None of them ever felt like transition contractions to me.
Wow.
I just must have done a little dilating. And I mean, it was from Thursday afternoon until Sunday morning.
Yeah, that's a long time to be having contractions, even if they are not necessarily what you would think of as labor contractions or transitional contractions.
They certainly weren't the kind of, they certainly weren't transitional contractions. I mean, I could say that right after I took the cohosh and digested it, I'd have sort of medium hard labor for a while, and then it would peter off. So anyway,
yeah, how did you react to that? What was your first thought?
Well, I was thinking the cohosh was working. I can't imagine. I mean, no, that's a very rare way for a labor to progress. And it did respond every time to the cohosh. So I think cohosh does have that effect. So my response was relief that she was born, and I didn't have to get into like refusing to have a C-section. So she was born exactly at the time when tomorrow they would have wanted me to go to the hospital and have a C-section. She was only 9 pounds, which is small, the smallest baby I'd had yet, which is, I know, not a small baby, but for me, it was a small baby. And she didn't look in the least overdue. She had more vernix than any baby I had. She had that languo, the fine hair. None of my other babies had that. she looked early, not late. And I really think that I was a month off on my dates and that I induced her 2 weeks early. And I feel guilty about that because I think babies should have all their weeks in the womb. But if I hadn't, the doctors would have done it anyway. So
was anyone else around when you had her, or were you completely by yourself?
I was by myself. My husband was in the bathroom and I didn't make any noise. He was really surprised when he came back in the room.
I'm sure. He walked in and then there was a baby.
Yeah, I was sitting on the edge of the bed nursing the baby.
That's incredible.
Of course, with the umbilical cord still attached. So after it stopped pumping, we tied and cut it. And then I sat in a rocker and nursed her. It took quite a while for the placenta to decide to come out, but it finally did. There was one thing, if I can back up a bit, one thing really odd about Lars's birth, number 5. We were waiting, after he was born, we were waiting for the umbilical cord to stop pumping. And it didn't. It just pumped and pumped and pumped and pumped and pumped for 45 minutes. So I called Dr. Muncie and said, what do I do? And he said, just tie it nice and tight and cut it. And the back pressure from that will make that flap in the heart, close the hole in the heart. So we did, and it was fine. But that was something I didn't know could happen. I don't, and also that then the placenta separated. It didn't separate before that. He also said that would make the placenta separate, and it did. So anyway, back to Meg. When I told Dr. Muncie how the labor went, he completely discounted the cohosh. His idea was she just had a long, drawn out labor. And he later told me, he didn't say at the time, but he later told me he thought that my uterus was worn out from having so many babies. And that's why I had that kind of labor. When I asked him about the maturity of the baby, all he would say was, she's certainly not late. I'm convinced she was early rather than late. But just, babies born 2 weeks earlier are still okay. So then we're at baby number 7. All of these babies are between 17 and 22 months apart, except between Joan and between the 3rd and the 4th, because I'd been nursing the first and second together. So that held off my fertility for longer. That was 26 months, I think. But the rest, pretty much nursing gives me 17 to 22 months apart. So we're on number 7. And by this point, we after having the baby without anybody there, we didn't think again about trying to get somebody to be there. We felt like we could do birth on our own. I was the kind of person who, if it were possible, I would have gotten a certified nurse midwife, but it wasn't possible. And as I said, there were no associations of midwives. If you got somebody unofficial, it was all you found out through networks. And I was home with babies all the time. I really didn't have any networks. So the labor for John was pretty typical until transition, and it just went on and on and on. And it felt exactly the way it felt way back with the 3rd birth, when the student doctor had come and said that I was dragging a bit of cervix down, and she put her hand in and pushed the cervix out of the way. So it felt exactly like that. So I thought, but there was nobody there who could do that. And I also had heard that if you pushed and it hurt, that meant the cervix wasn't out of the way and that it could swell up and actually stop the birth or slow it down, make it much, much harder. So I was afraid to push. So it went on for like an hour like that. And I was putting one leg up on the side of the bed and the other leg up on the side of the bed. And I tried walking up and down the stairs. And then finally I said, I'm just going to push. And I did. I pushed when it hurt and I pushed right through that. And then the baby was ready to be born. Now, his birth wasn't so hard for me, but I think it was hard on him. The cord was around his neck many times, and my husband couldn't unwind it when just his head was out. We had declined that tool to cut the cord because I was afraid that I would get a shoulder stuck, and then I'd have a baby getting no oxygen who couldn't come out. So I just pushed him out, and it pulled the cord pretty tight. And when he came out, he was real blue and purple. Every other baby I had just came out and was crying right away. So at this point, all my kids are I'm sitting on the edge of the bed. My husband's kneeling in front of me with the baby, and all the kids are sitting around in a circle behind him. And they're all going, "It's a boy, it's a boy." And I remember saying, "But this baby's in trouble." And I had to hand him back to my husband so he could unwrap him. And then I remember I turned him over on my knees, and I had heard that putting your knees up and down could help their lungs expand, like it would push air out. And so anyway, I was doing that and patting him and saying, "Come on, baby," and all the things that you do, rubbing his back. And finally he cried. And we had pictures taken with a disc camera. My oldest son was taking them. So I showed them to the doctor because I was really concerned that it, had been a problem. And he said, "No, lots of babies born in the hospital, forceps babies, lots of babies take that long to pink up, and don't worry about it." But he had little hemorrhage in his eyes from having that cord pulled tight when I pushed him out. And once he started crying, he howled and he howled, and he could not be consoled. And he wouldn't nurse. He wouldn't settle. Finally, we laid him on the bed and laid a receiving blanket over him, so there was no light to his eyes, and he finally calmed down. I remember Emily, number 4, picked up the blanket and looked at him and was the first one to make eye contact. So then I picked him up and started nursing him, and he nursed and he nursed and he nursed and he nursed. And he literally nursed for 13 straight hours.
Oh, wow.
And I figured, I think maybe his blood sugar is falling, because he was definitely a huge baby. He looked bigger than Carl had looked. In fact, when I stepped on the scale with him and without him, he was just a hair under 13 pounds. So I figured he might be getting that low blood sugar thing. And I had some formula put away somewhere just in case that happened. But I had a friend who was nursing come to visit me. And I said, I think his blood sugar is low, and I'd rather have breast milk than formula. Would you nurse him? So she nursed him on both sides, and he fell asleep and I fell asleep. And when I woke up, my milk was already in. So he was fine after that. He didn't get the polycythemia, but he was a very difficult baby. After about 8 months, he started rocking and banging his head on the bed, and only thing that would comfort him is nursing incessantly. And I was pregnant with the next one, and starting to get sore nipples. And I'd nurse him for an hour and then put him down, and he'd be sitting up banging his head against the bed. So he had a lot of some of the autistic things that babies, and I had read about autism, and I wondered, but he spoke early. It's just more the thing of any change drove him nuts. And he had a problem with textures. Once he got upset, he would be upset endlessly. He actually invented negative numbers for himself and when he was just 4, and he still wasn't toilet trained, but he invented negative numbers for himself because he would sit in a corner writing numbers for hours, which is very autistic-y. And I felt guilty, of course. Why is my child banging his head so hard that he banged a head in the sheetrock, And I was afraid that it was because he had that hard birth, but you can't prove anything like that. Right. And my sister had a child who had some autism too. So it may be that it's genetic and it's in our genetics.
Yeah,
So
there's so many different factors that could play into that. It's definitely not like one single thing that happened.
it's just the kind of guilt that people have. I was so upset by those hemorrhages in his eyes. And again, the doctor was like, they'll go away. They're no big deal. So then the next birth was very easy, and the baby was only 8.5 pounds. My
And that was
husband
your
said,
smallest so far then, right?
yes, yes. And my husband said, you must be wearing out. This baby is so tiny.
And was
And
that one just you and your husband and the kids as well?
he just me and my husband. He was born in the middle of the night, and we didn't wake anybody up.
Oh, okay.
And there wasn't. I woke my husband up. Oh, there is a story about that birth. My husband had said to me, whatever you do, don't go into labor on Saturday evening, because he was going to be working 13 hours that day in the restaurant kitchen, moving the whole time. So Saturday was like 4 days after my due date. And I was taking a bath, and I was thinking, I had just read about creative visualization, and how people could use it in birth. But I didn't really believe in it. I still sort of thought it was like what they would call woo, I didn't believe in it. So I'm lying in the bathtub relaxed, and I'm having a few Braxton Hicks contractions, and I'm imagining my cervix opening up. And by the time I got out of the tub, I was in labor. I think I managed to put myself into labor.
That visualization really worked.
Yes. So my husband came home, and I said, I'm in labor. And he's like, I told you not to do that on Saturday, and I have to sleep. And he just walked into the bedroom and fell asleep. And the kids were all asleep. I just walked up and down in the hall by myself, laboring. And there were two people in my head. And one person was saying, why do I have to suffer like this? And the other one was saying, don't be ridiculous, Susan. This is a very easy labor. So then I realized that it was getting to be time for the baby to be born. And I went and woke my husband up, and I said, you got to get up. This baby's going to be born. Why don't you go downstairs and make us some tea? So he went downstairs and put the kettle on, came back up, got in bed, and went back to sleep. So the kettle was boiling away down there, and I'm having contractions like one on top of each other. But I walked down the stairs and make the tea and carry it upstairs and put it on my dresser. And then I go over to my husband and said, if you want to catch this baby, you have to get out of bed. And I walked around and sat on my side of the bed, and he stumbled around and stuck up out his hand and caught the baby. And I drank the tea between the baby and the placenta, and it was still hot. So
do you remember how long that was from the time you were in the tub until baby was born then?
I think, well, it was about midnight or 11:30 when I was in the 11:30 or midnight when I was in the tub. And he was born about 4 o'clock in the morning. So not a long, especially long labor, but not a real precipitate one either. So after that, he was a pretty easy baby. He turned out to be a very, very difficult teenager, but he was he was such an easy baby. And the next oldest one was such a difficult baby that I feel all the attention was drained away from him. Everything was always about John and his tantrums. So yeah, and then our house burned down when that baby was 3 months old. It was caused by the dryer. So I had given John oatmeal in his high chair and gone up to and moved the laundry from the washer to the dryer, and turned on the dryer. I had the baby on my back, and I heard the oatmeal start to plop against the wall down there. John was throwing oatmeal against the wall. So I went back downstairs and I said, I guess you don't want this oatmeal. Let's feed it to the dog who was out. So we went outside and gave the oatmeal to the dog, and I heard the fire alarm going off. So I ran up I thought, why is that stupid thing going off? And I ran up the stairs, and black smoke was billowing out of my laundry room down to about 6 inches above the floor. So I knew that there was no going in there and putting out a fire. So I ran to get the 3-year-old, and her bedroom had been a little tiny kitchen when the house was 3 apartments. So her bed was kind of pushed in under an overhanging cabinet, and I was very scared. I was scared we would get caught in a fire, and scared that my 2-year-old would come back in and I couldn't find him. So I grabbed her out of bed really hard, and she was like, "Mommy, why did you?" And I hit her head. "Why did you hit my head?" And I said, "Make the house is on fire." She said, "No, it's not." And the next thing she said, as I went stupidly down the back stairs by the smoke, was, "What's all that smoke?" So I went outside, and John was still watching the dog eat the oatmeal. And I took one, I think I picked them up one under each arm, and baby still on my back, and went walking across the street to pull the fire alarm. And they came sliding down. By the end, I was kind of dragging them by their collars to get them away and across the street. I pulled the fire alarm, and then I went into the apartment building there and called the fire department from the lobby. The news people got there before the fire department. But apparently I didn't see it. I was at somebody's house when it was on TV, and somebody said, "Susan, come here, you're on TV." But it was one of those, 15-second clips. But they had a clip of me walking with the baby on my back, and the 2 kids, falling out from under my arms, walking across the street. So I don't know whether that clip of film still exists, but I never saw it.
Oh my
But a lot of people described it to me. So after that, they wouldn't sell us replacement value insurance, only enough to cover the mortgage and the contents. So we had a very small amount of money, and we couldn't find a house that we could buy in Baltimore that we could stand that fit us all after that big, it was run down, but it was a beautiful Victorian. My husband says I'm getting off the subject of birth. Anyway, we were worried about how we could afford to send our kids to high school, and the oldest ones were approaching it. So we decided to move up to the country. We wanted to move outside of a city, and we went back to New York, where we came from. And my husband picked Ithaca as a small city where he could work in restaurants. And he asked a real estate agent to find a house for under $30,000 that 10 people could live in. And he had to do it in one weekend. So she managed to find us a house. It was much inferior to the house we'd had in Baltimore, but we were able to fit into it. Not easily, but we did. So we moved up here. And I guess from the shock, it turned out I think I had a miscarriage. I was 2 weeks overdue, which never happened to me. And then I bled a lot right the day we got to the new house. So I think I had an early miscarriage. That was before you could go to the drugstore and get a pregnancy test. You had to go to a doctor and have it done in a lab. So I hadn't found out that I was pregnant. So I can't prove I had a miscarriage, but I think I did. And then I didn't have another baby for 3.5 years. I thought I'd actually gotten natural family planning, finally got it to work for me. But I think maybe I was just less fertile in my late 30s than I had been. But anyway, so at 39, I got pregnant with my last one. Here I didn't have Dr. Mumsey. I didn't live 5 minutes from a hospital the way I had in Baltimore. I lived about 45 minutes from any hospital in any direction. So somebody referred me to a nurse midwife, and I went to see her, and I told her I'd like to have a home birth, even though I'd had C-sections. And she talked to her doctor, and the doctor said, "Well, we normally don't do that, but I think her uterus has proved itself." So he approved it. By then, they were doing way more tests than they ever did early on in my childbearing career. So all these tests went wrong, even though there was really nothing wrong. now they had gotten to where I'm Rh negative, and I always got a RhoGAM shot afterwards. I forgot to tell you what Dr. Muncie did for me. He would, when he came to my house, we would have saved cord blood. He'd given me something to save the cord blood in. And he would drive to the lab and wait for them to cross match it and give him the RhoGAM shot. And he'd drive back to my house and give me it. And he never charged me for that. He just took whatever insurance I had. He took for the prenatal care. And one time I didn't have insurance. He just courtesied the whole thing. So anyway, this time they were going to give the RhoGAM at 28 weeks during the pregnancy. They had changed that. And they do a titer first, and they said it showed I'd been sensitized. Well, big, horrible things. Oh, you'll have to be induced. Oh, your baby might need a transfusion, all this stuff. And so they sent me again for titers, and the hospital didn't report. And finally, the midwife called the hospital, and they said, well, we really didn't want to tell you this, but the first was a mistake. The sample had been away from the lab too long, and it wasn't accurate. And the titers I hadn't made any antibodies against the Rh factor. It was all a false alarm.
And they just weren't going to say anything?
Well, I guess the people who would normally deliver the results had put it for a superior who would explain what the problem was. Mm-hmm. And that person hadn't gotten around to it. But it had gotten lost on her desk or something. And also I again had somewhat high blood sugars and was gaining weight a lot. So she gave me a diabetic diet to follow, and I followed it, and it turned out I lost weight. She said, oh no, we don't want you losing weight. So she said, eat more. Anyway, I one morning I started having contractions, and I called her, and she and her assistant showed up in my house, and my labor stopped. It was like, I can't deal with having these basically strangers in my house. So she luckily, she said sometimes when women go to the hospital, their labor stops. So she and her assistant went away, actually for an hour and a half, and my labor started again. And she came back, and I was walking around doing stuff in the house. And I could tell that she didn't think I was really in labor, or that I was in very, very early labor and she was going to be there forever. But she had been a home birth midwife before she became a nurse midwife. So she wasn't going to do a vaginal exam unless there was a reason to. I felt like I guilty because she thought I wasn't in labor or that she thought I'd called her too early. So I went up to the stairs to the bathroom one time, and when I wiped myself, I felt something meaty feeling. I had never felt the bag of waters before. I didn't know what it was. So I went downstairs and I said, Pat, would you examine me? I felt something really funny. So she examined me and she said, it's the bulging bag of waters. You're 7 centimeters dilated. So literally from 7 centimeters to fully dilated. I sat in a rocking chair, rocking back and forth, and we talked about where to get natural peanut butter around there. And suddenly I jumped, I had a harder contraction, and I jumped up, and she got all alert. And that was when the baby came down the birth canal, and it was time to give birth. So basically, only contractions that hurt during that labor were 2 when I lay down on the bed, and then they hurt some. But as long as I stayed up and walking, they didn't hurt. So I remember when it was time to give birth, I remembered what that burning, stretching sensation felt like. And I said, I remember what this feels like. And like, I don't want to do it. And I was really thinking, it's crazy, but I was thinking maybe I could just stay pregnant. And I didn't have that urgency to get the baby out the way you usually do when you've been in labor and you want it just to be over. But she said, so when I said, I don't want to do this, she said, well, do you think we can get somebody to do it for you? Which must have been a standard line she used. And I laughed. And then when I laughed, the baby started being born. And I started to sit on the edge of the bed where I used to, but I think we had changed mattresses. And this one, there was too far between the mattress and the thing at wood at the edge of the bed. And so it wasn't comfortable. So I stood up, and I had read about supported squat position. So I got my husband to put his arms under my arms and hung down on his arms. And this wouldn't have worked if it had been just the two of us, but that was really a very comfortable position to give birth in. So that's how Christian was born, with me sort of hanging on my husband's arms with my knees part bent. The midwife said she got a face full of amniotic fluid, but I guess that's part of the job sometimes. So she was the last one. She was midwives. I've had a hanging scale, and she was 10 pounds 4 ounces.
So your smallest was 8.5. And then your largest, did you say just shy of, was it 12?
Just shy of 13, standing on the scale and off the scale, just a hair under the 13 mark. And then some meconium came, and it was a couple ounces under 13 pounds. So I don't know whether you count the meconium or not, but he was really huge. He really looked the size of a 3-month-old baby, but he had a newborn appearance. I couldn't fit any newborn size clothes on him. The 0 to 3 months clothes didn't fit him, not even when he was born.
Well, I have one question that I like to ask all of the guests that I have on the podcast, and that is for any women that have had a C-section and are trying to decide what they want to do, whether it's birthing in a hospital, having another C-section, or having a home birth. Is there anything that you learned along the way in your journey, or any advice that you would give to them?
Well, aside to first-time mothers, to start with a home birth, so they won't have a C-section, so they're much less likely to have a C-section. It's to trust that their bodies can can birth. I mean, you can't say every woman can birth, but most women can give birth. And back then, it was standard when a woman had a vaginal delivery after a C-section for the doctor to put his hand up inside and feel the scar. And Dr. Muncie did that, and my scar was perfect. There was no separation at all. And that helped me not feel scared in the next births. I don't think it's standard to do that anymore, but all those anxieties you have during pregnancy, if I would feel like a little, stretching pinch in that part, I would think, oh, is the scar breaking? But I would always be able to think Dr. Muncie felt it and it was okay. So I would encourage everybody to try to have a vaginal birth after a C-section, and that they believe that they probably can. And I would say you have a much greater chance to do it at home. I remember when I went to another conference it was for learning to be some kind of childbirth instructor. And there was a woman there who had a C-section, and her baby was 5.5 pounds. And they told her that she didn't have room to deliver that baby. But she decided to stay home and have the next baby. And she gave birth squatting, and she delivered an 8.5-pound baby.
3 whole pounds more than They told her she couldn't do.
Right. So you just cannot always believe somebody who tells you you can't do something. I mean, I had a neonatologist tell me I shouldn't have any more babies, and I had 6 more. So I don't know how to advise people, because there will be some time when the doctor is right about something. So I say people have to educate themselves, go to see another doctor, look it up online. At one point I had about 6 obstetrics books and 2 midwifery books and every popular book on childbirth that had been published at that time. I tried to learn as much as I could.
That education is key, and arming yourself with the knowledge and just learning about your own body and the way that birth even works. Because I feel like that's not something that young women are commonly told or that's talked about now, which is a shame.
I think women now are and their mothers gave birth in the hospital and their friends give birth in the hospital, so they never see a birth. So it's pretty strange to them.
Yeah.
I mean, one little sequel to this is that my oldest daughter, my first VBAC, she got pregnant when she was 15 and gave birth when she was 16. She didn't want to have a baby at home because she obviously felt that she wouldn't have any privacy in our little house with all her brothers and sisters around. But she went to the she went to the hospital, refused any medication. She had a very standard textbook first labor, 24 hours from the first contractions to the birth and slowly building up. But she, even right before the birth, she was never scared. She never screamed. She never got agitated. Because she'd been at so many births, and she knew that I gave birth without making a lot of noise and without being scared, and she'd seen it happen. So there was another 16-year-old girl in the room next door who was screaming her head off and just obviously panicky. And I think the difference was she'd been around birth. She believed that baby would come out of her. And she wasn't scared.
Yeah, that makes a big difference.
I caught her fourth baby at home.
Oh, really?
Yeah. She thought her husband was going to catch, and she brought her husband's, I think, stepfather, who was an EMT. But they both seemed really like wide-eyed and like totally not wanting to do anything when the baby was crowning. I was there at the foot of the bed with one arm around my youngest child and one arm around my oldest grandchild. So they were 10 and 8, and I had my arms around them. I was supposed to be their support person. And the head came out, and it didn't turn, and it didn't turn, and it didn't turn. And I put my hand under the shoulder and just rotated, and the baby came out corkscrewing. So reading all those obstetrics books helped me help my grandchild.
Wow, what a cool story. But to be able to be there like that for the birth of your grandchild, there's not a lot of people that can say that they've been able to do that. That's very cool.
Oh, yeah, I was there for when her first was born in the hospital. And it was my 41st birthday. So my first grandchild and I share a birthday.
That's very special too.
Something happened with her baby was small, 6'1", and blood sugar was down. They insisted on giving it some formula. Then I said, well, now can I take the baby back to my daughter? Oh, no, now she has to have a bath, and that'll make her blood sugar go down again. And I said, well, you don't have to give her a bath. She's not dirty. Vernix isn't dirty. So they called the doctor in the middle of the night, and he said, no, you don't have to give the baby a bath. Oh, but before that, when the baby's blood sugar was low and they said she had to decide between sugar water or formula, I said, well, I'm still nursing. I could nurse her. And they were like, you're crazy. They thought it was the craziest idea. So I went back and told my daughter, you have to decide between formula and sugar water. And we decided together that formula would be better because we know sugar water makes your blood sugar go up and then it crashes. So, but as I was walking back to the nursery, I heard the nurses saying that crazy grandmother thinks she can nurse her grandchild.
Hey, I don't think that that's crazy at all. Wow.
So when my daughter got home, she came home 15 hours after the birth, and she was tired, and she was trying to nurse the baby, and the baby was fussing, and she was getting upset, and she said, this baby doesn't want me. And I said, you're upset and tense, and the baby's feeling it. why don't you go lie down and sleep, and I'll nurse the baby and get her calmed down, and I'll tuck her in next to you. And I did that. And, I sort of, knowing how to nurse a baby, I was able to help that baby nurse, and she nursed well, and I tucked her in next to my daughter, and there was never a problem nursing again. So.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. Well, thank you so much just for being willing to share all of your stories and just tell us about your whole childbearing journey. That was really incredible to listen to.
I wish I could be young again and start over.
I've had women tell me it's fun to be able to tell all of the stories in order like that.
Oh yes, but I know I would. We were pretty poor at the time I had the last one, and right after that I went to nursing school, so I was very involved. And then I went and got my bachelor's in nursing, so I was very involved in school. And by the time I thought, gee, I'd like to have another baby, it was too late. But now I wish I could just kept going. However,
awesome.
then wasn't the time, and our time to do that isn't unending. It isn't infinite.
Yeah.
I can't say that there weren't some tough spots along the way, but so thanks for listening. I do love to tell these stories, and sometimes I start telling someone and I get up to about 4 and I see their eyes glaze over, and I know that I have to stop because they don't want to hear 9 birth stories. So I'm so glad you did.
Yes, I loved hearing all 9, and I know the listeners will love to hear all 9 as well. So thank you again. I just really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, you're very welcome.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Home Birth After Cesarean podcast. Make sure to subscribe, leave a rating, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. If you're interested in sharing your home birth after cesarean story, send us an email at hbacpodcast@gmail.com. See you next week.